Welcome back to the table. Ryan and I just played Imperial Miners. Spoiler alert, it's not Imperial Settlers.
Yeah, I mean, you might not even know, if you don't know what Imperial Settlers is, but that was a very popular civilization game from Portal. This is a brand new game set in the same world.
Yes.
And it does have some thematic tie-ins with Imperial Settlers as far as you are kind of interacting with these different civilizations that all have kind of different focuses and powers. But the game itself is vastly different. I mean, it's not even like the same genre.
Yeah, for sure. This is an engine builder through and through. And at that, a pretty straightforward, simple one, but it has some interesting spatial element to the engine that you're building. Because we're going to be building mines underneath this surface level here.
Yeah.
So what you see here on the table are basically our end game situation. Spoiler alert again, Ryan crushed me. We've got the surface board, and then we've got up to 4 levels beneath that.
Yeah.
Then we've got all these cards up here, which represent the different cards we're going to be using to build out those levels. And these cards come in all sorts of flavors, including all those different civilizations that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Not to mention a stack of 10 event cards. There are more event cards in the game, but you take 10 of these, and this is basically the game timer. You flip one of these over at the beginning of each round, and it's going to have an event that's either an immediate effect, an ongoing effect throughout that round, or something that happens at the end of that round.
Yeah.
But effectively, like I said, it is the game timer. And then you've got these progress boards here.
Yeah, these are tracks that you can go up during the game. Again, a lot of what you're doing in this game is driven by the cards you're playing. In fact, even you don't really start with much. You start with a few cards in your hand.
Yeah.
No money. So you're going to have to get that money. You're going to have to find ways to go up this track. You're even going to have to find ways to draw new cards because you don't start with any natural way of drawing cards. So if you can find ways to go up these tracks, they do give you some significant benefits during the game. And in fact, these tracks are the only way to get these powerful level 4 cards. And there's a reason that these are so powerful, and it has to do with the core concept of the game, in that you are building down this mine, and you're going to have access to level 1s, level 2s, and level 3s. Every time you place a card in your mine, you get to activate that card, and then you get to make a chain following like one card on level 3, the card you played, then one on level 2, one on level 1, and then any one of the abilities on the ground level, which includes potentially moving up this track, gaining some money, gaining some cards or whatever. But once you play a level 3 card, you can't really play below that, so you can't trigger that level 3 card again unless you find ways to earn level 4 cards, play those on the bottom, and then some of those really lucrative chains that you built, you're actually firing off again by placing a level 4 card underneath.
Yeah, and there's a little more to it on each of those levels as you go up from level 3 to 2 to 1. It has to be a card directly adjacent to the card that you just activated, so you can't just do any level 2 or any level 1 card. So you're kind of like working your way up, making decisions if you have a couple rooms above the one that you just activated, all the way up to the 3 that are kind of built in. Again, we don't start with anything, but you do start with a few powers here to give you money, to let you spend money to go up the progress, or to draw some cards. But all the cards that you play beneath there do variations on those things, but also some very significant things. The further you get down, you're going to start accumulating the points of the game as well. Yeah. Not to mention, as you can see on a lot of these cards, there's these little minecart diagrams or these icons. Some of them, when you connect them, complete a minecart. Some of them are half of a minecart. Those ones can be filled with these little adorable minecart tokens.
That's a fun little
and there are
tactile element.
Yeah, various things in the game that will let you add these. And when you add them, you can never add them to a space that has both empties. Yeah. It has to be at least half full, and then you can add that there. Those are simply going to be points at the end of the game. The ones that are both printed and the cards themselves.
Yeah, and those are worth points, but also, matching those printed, matching the pre-printed ones and like basically creating a minecart is really good. There's some cards that might score for having these mine carts out. There's some events that might score for having these mine carts out. But it's just one more thing you have to think about when building this, because really you're building these multiple different lines up and you're trying to hit these cards in a specific order. Now, I referenced at the beginning of the video, the civilizations still come into play. Each one of these cards is linked to a particular civilization that does a particular thing well. So if you can create a line of the same civilization, those abilities kind of follow the same pattern. For example, all of the Scott cards let you do abilities by paying less gold for the number of Scott cards. So you're kind of wanting to put more of those out. Of course, to a certain point, you're limited by what you can draw. So unless you're finding ways to draw more cards, or if you're taking the draw cards action, this game is a lot more about making the best of what you've got than it is trying to enact some grand strategy because you've played the game before. You know there's some powerful level 3 card in there. But like, look how you might never see that card.
No, you might never see it. And it must be said, this game is fast.
Yeah.
It is 10 rounds. And what you're doing in your round, there's the event phase where you flip over the event, and then the mind phase where everyone chooses one of their cards. You reveal it simultaneously, and then everyone just simultaneously adds it to their mind and does their thing. You don't have to take turns or anything like this, so it can go really, really fast. I also want to point out, you really need to balance the various things that you need to do in this game. There's not many different things, but you can't ignore these tracks. And I also want to point out about these tracks 2 things. One, they're double-sided. So they've got 6 different areas that you can actually climb up. So you're going to want to look at the top category on each of those to see what it does at the top. Mainly, because of the other thing I want to point out, these are not tracks that you're like, oh, I hope to get to the top by the end of the game.
Right.
These are tracks meant to go through and get to another track, because whenever you reach the top, you get to do its power, which is pretty significant typically.
And usually about scoring points. Not always, but a lot of times they're about scoring points.
But as soon as you get up there, then you can move to a different track at the bottom, so you can start climbing up those. Like Ryan said, these tracks are the only ways to get those level 4s. So if you have one route up from a level 3 to the top surface that you want to tap more than once, you need to do that so you can get at least 2 of those level 4s to run that twice.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up with 3 level 4 cards, which is why I was able to trigger some of my level 3 cards.
I had one, which was probably
times.
where the game was lost.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's incredibly helpful to have. Now, I'll say I did find a lot of satisfaction in that triggering process of like, okay, I know I want to trigger this card, and then moving up. And then each card effectively gives you maybe 2 options of the card you want to take next. And so you can build some interesting combo paths where the things that you get down below kind of start to be spent as you move up. I mean, there's really a lot of potential combos in this game, a ton, with all these different cards.
Plus, they've kind of enhanced some of the cards so they're not just as simple as do what the card says.
Yeah.
Some of them will add a couple different tokens. There's these machine tokens and the rubble tokens. When you have a machine token, the card might say, add a machine token, and then do this for the number of machine tokens that are on this card, and you can do that maybe up to 3 times, so you can have 3 machine tokens and really use it. The collapse or rubble tokens, a lot of the more powerful cards will say, add rubble to this card and do this awesome action, but the next time you were to activate that card, you have to just remove the rubble instead.
Or find other cards that remove rubble from other cards, which is a way you can kind of combo that. So I will say, let's just jump into like talking about who this game is for, because I think you've kind of, there's definitely a lot of, you feel very smart playing this game, but the game lends itself to that. You can, but it does that with a level of accessibility, because pretty much any string of cards that you put together is going to feel very satisfying, because you're like, I get this, I do this. So you don't necessarily have to be good at the game at all to get that high level of satisfaction that you'd get from an engine builder. Some engine building games require you to like really know the game before you really start to do well.
100%.
This game, I mean, your first game, you're going to feel great.
Yeah. With that said, I think more enthusiast gamers or people who want to do well can do that as well.
Sure.
Like anyone can feel satisfied as they play the game. And then at the end of the game, the people who do it the best are going to score a fair amount of points, or potentially score a fair amount of points more than those players who just like, you know, spun the wheels and turned the dials and didn't really think too much about it.
But you know what? The one thing we didn't really mention is a lot of this is being done simultaneously, because you're just playing this card. So you're not really looking on the table, and you're not, even if you're doing bad, you're not really aware that you're doing bad. You're just kind of focused on your own mind.
Yeah.
So if you've got like families that are playing this game, or you're bringing it to your kids or your parents, they're really just focused on their own thing. I don't think you're really looking around to see, well, am I behind right now? You're just getting points. You're just doing a bunch of stuff, getting a bunch of coins, a bunch of points, a bunch of tokens. And I think that would feel good for everybody.
Yeah, so that's really, if you're looking for a good engine builder, a very sort of family-friendly engine builder.
Yeah, it's like right around that Gizmos weight level, I think.
Yeah, I would say specifically, if you like gizmos, this is going to be a game sort of up your alley.
Yeah.
I would say one caveat there is on your first play with the family in particular, I would maybe take a little time on the first couple rounds to walk everyone through what they're doing so that no one's making mistakes. Because like any simultaneous game, this is one of those things where you might like, oh, I misunderstood. I was running all of my cards.
Sure, right. Uh-oh.
You just want to make sure everyone's doing things the way they should. Now, let's talk a little bit about who this game is not for.
I think we hit the nail on the head right there, because everything we just described is not really how Imperial Settlers is.
No, it's very different. So and this isn't really a ding against this game.
No.
But it is more of a warning if you're expecting the next Imperial Settlers.
Or even that level of depth.
Yeah, this is not that
there's
game.
a little bit of depth. Literally.
You see what he did there?
No, but if you're expecting that kind of depth that Imperial Settlers brings, I don't think you're necessarily going to find that level here. And it's not meant to be that level.
No. This is a more accessible game. This is an engine building game. It's a very different game that just happens to be set in that universe. Now, with that said, if you really like the way that universe looks, which I do, I love looking at the artwork on these cards and these mines. It gives you that really sort of like Fallout vault.
Sure, like looking at that top
thing, looking at the side view of this mine that you're building. But I do think if you're looking for maybe Imperial Settlers Plus, this is probably a lighter experience.
It's definitely a lighter experience. I think there are definitely engine builders out there that more appeal to heavier gamers, but that's not a knock. Again, that's not a knock on this game because it's not meant to be. It's meant to be light and refreshing. And when you're playing it with, you're going to play this game in like 45 minutes. It's not meant to be a long game at all. So this is a great game that fills in a lot of those gaps, I think, in people's collections.
Yeah, so if you have any questions at all about this game, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time, of course, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.